Noah said, she asked this question about APAC. They had a protest over the weekend and whether she thinks actions in the U.S. and abroad will have an impact on the condition in Palestine.
Absolutely. And I think that's the only thing that will have an impact, Tim. You mentioned BDS before, that was the only thing that was really able to end the apartheid state of South Africa. And that is the only thing that will be able to end the apartheid state of Israel. The thing is, politicians in the US are preempting like the zeitgeist, this culture of resistance against the occupation, that they are actually preempting passing legislation against BDS. In New York, Cuomo is trying to pass this bill. I mean, it's stunning. And across Europe, too, they're making it illegal to have Palestinian rallies. It's shocking the level of criminalization just simply for solidarity with Palestinians because of the stronghold that either the Israeli lobby or the U.S. empire or both has on these institutions. I mean, it's just stunning. There's no institution fighting on behalf of Palestinians. That's for damn sure. So it's up to the people. It's up to people's power only.
It just seems so strange, Abby, because we're so supportive, I would say in America, of Muslims. Like we're dead against Islamophobia. Look, the present administration aside, right? I'm talking before Trump. Before Trump, like the way I looked at it was like we were trying to support, Muslims. But meanwhile, abroad, we're funding the people that are doing atrocities and human rights violations to the hilt, and people don't talk about it. And I'm wondering, like you said, it's politicians can't talk about it. I'm thinking journalists can't talk about it too often either.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned something really interesting. We like to pretend like we support Muslims and people of color here. Tim, look at what we've been doing around the world for the last 15 years, bombing 7 Muslim countries. I mean, good God, we've been killing tens of thousands, a million Iraqis alone.
But Abby, look, we don't want to ban them on planes, so we're good, right?
We don't want them to fight us over here, right? I mean, it's nuts. So it's like this whole culture of Islamophobia. People act like Trump is this aberration who came out of the blue. No, it's been fostered and normalized for quite a long time with the mass spying apparatus on Muslim communities, the registry, and the bombing and civil rights erosions for Muslims around the world on behalf of the U.S. empire.
Yeah, we bring that up a lot about, the 7 countries we've been bombing and how no one was outraged. At least you didn't hear anyone talk about it in an outraged fashion on mainstream media. But the moment someone said, hey, we need to, give a 90-day reprieve on, bringing folks in the country and have a ban on that for 90 days or whatever, people freaked out. And I was like, let's be a little consistent here. Either we're going to support people or we're not going to support people. Either we're going to support Muslims or we're not. And it's like, it just seems like, I don't know. I know it had to drive you crazy after visiting these places and seeing it firsthand.
Oh, man, the partisanship drives me nuts.
The refugee situation. I want people to really feel, as best you can, like, what's the life like there?
Yeah, so this is a huge part of Israel that I had absolutely no idea about, Tim. I mean, I just went over there thinking, okay, I'm going to go to the West Bank and report on Palestinians. And then Dan Cohen, the guy that I was mentioning before, told me about this whole other side of it. I had known, of course, that there are Ethiopian Jews living in Israel. Of course, Israel likes to tout itself as this multicultural, ethnically diverse country that hosts Ethiopians. And look, they're in the military and they're hanging out with the white Israelis. But when it comes down to it, Ethiopian Jews are treated very poorly. When you look at the poverty rates and the discrimination against them is just stunning. I think 52% of Ethiopian Jews live in poverty, but then you look at America, my God, half the country is living in poverty too. They're only basically 2% of the population, yet they experience a lot of racism. And I was really stunned to learn that there was actually a eugenics program against Ethiopian Jews, where they were inserting Depo-Provera birth control shots, injections into Ethiopian women coming over and not telling them what it was. And their birth rate actually dropped 50% from 2002 to 2012 because of this eugenics program. But that's just the Ethiopian Jews living there. And they actually, in 1973, a rabbi was like, all right, Ethiopians can live here now. You guys are technically Jewish too, come over here. So they had all this weird rescue operations where they brought a bunch of Ethiopians there. But the birth control thing really shows you that this is about something else, that they want to appear ethnically diverse, but really they are about trying to control the birth rate and try to keep maintaining that white ethno-nationalist state, Tim. But the refugee situation is stunning. So Israel is a place where it's a refuge for victims of Holocaust, right? Victims of genocide. Come here, escape persecution. Oddly enough, it's turned into the worst country to accept refugees almost. There was a lot of refugees coming in from Sudan and Eritrea that you should hear these people's stories. I mean, God, escaping Darfur, escaping Eritrea, where you have mandatory conscription, where it's like essentially indentured servitude for years and years. And once they finally make it through Africa, make it through Egypt, mind you, a lot of it was during like a horrible time in Egypt too. They make it through. I talked to one guy, Ollie, who, he was in prison in Egypt, and then they finally make it to Israel because they hear Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. They it's a refuge for Holocaust survivors and genocide survivors. So they all go there thinking that they will at least have some sort of ability to create a life, to create some sort of value for their families. And they get there and they are thrown in prison camps. There is what Israeli officials have actually called a concentration camp. I'm not just saying that lightly. That is what Israeli officials have called this. It is on the border of the desert, in the Negev desert, in the middle of the blazing heat, on the border of Egypt, where there is the biggest prison camp of its kind. I know that America has bigger prisons, obviously, but this is the biggest prison for refugees of its kind in any institutionalized country in the world. And it houses about 3,000 refugees at a time, males only, because they want to separate them, once again, controlling the birth rate. They keep these people indefinitely. I heard that people were actually up there after over a year. They just keep extending the time. They keep them in these prisons. If you refuse to be detained at this facility in Holot, then you actually go to a legitimate prison across the street. There's a prison. And they check into this camp. It's essentially a prison camp. You have to check in like 5 times a day. If you miss one of the check-ins or curfews, you just go to prison. And on top of that, it's just horrible that there's nothing for these people. The food is terrible. They live in absolutely inhumane conditions. And not only that, but Israel's conducting military exercises constantly, essentially re-traumatizing genocide survivors with military exercises. Every morning they wake up to artillery shells and bombings around the camp. I was at the camp and I was just stunned at how this is even legal and happening. Right. And it was passed by the Supreme Court because people called these people infiltrators. Tim, I even went to an anti-refugee rally in Tel Aviv where people were saying the most crazy racist stuff I've ever heard, saying that they wouldn't even call them like human beings. They would call them infiltrators and said that they're just coming here to rape, pillage, and commit crimes. And when you talk to these African refugees there, they just want a life. They just want to live. I talked to one of them who said, they basically are trying to make life such hell for us that they're trying to get us to self-deport. And he said, I'm never going to do that until they're committing genocide against me. I have to be here because I can't go back to the hell I came from because I'm going to die. So I'll stay here until Israel's committing genocide against me. And that's what they do now. They built a giant wall in Trump's wet dream. Now barely anyone comes across, but now they still have to deal with the people that are already there. So they've already blocked them from living in the main cities. They force them out in this desert, and they're just trying to make lives a living hell for these people. It's absolutely insane.
Where the fuck is the UN?
Like I said before, man, look what just happened to that person at the UN. And right before that, the UN finally made that arbitrary thing about the settlements being the UN's. Look, the UN is toothless without the U.S. empire really setting the stage here. And it just seems like it's all just symbolic horseshit. And, this UN official who finally said the word apartheid, dared to say the word apartheid, and he's gone. That's how insane the stranglehold over the narrative is.